So we'll begin DEIJB conversations. And it was so important to me given the results of the election and how that is impacting people and communities, and especially our spiritual communities. And of course, I am aware that there are many people who are celebrating and and I'm not really convinced of that. I feel like maybe there are people who are happy with the outcome of the election, but I'm not sure they are celebrating. So it feels like there's still a lot of division and divisiveness and stressful conversations. A lot of families, holidays are changing. And so we're feeling divisiveness within our families around the holiday table, and the holidays are stressful enough oftentimes. So I thought it would be important to just kind of bring that into this experience, our DEIJB conversations. And so the topic for today is supporting marginalized voices. And I think there's a real opportunity right now, more than ever. There's always opportunity, but more than ever to really be present to those who are particularly in stress due to the national political rhetoric that is happening. I'm talking about our trans communities, our LGBTQ community, our immigrant communities, people of color, all the marginalized voices, people who are also heavily reliant on Medicare, Medicaid, are feeling very concerned, and Social Security. So everything is up. On top of that, or maybe underneath that, we're coming into the holiday season. We're coming into the end of a year, which naturally is a time that some people experience depression or grief, or stress or financial stress, emotional, spiritual stress, all of the things. And so, for us to really tap into our tools, into our principles, and then to also have some practical tools that we can use as spiritual leaders to help ourselves, right? Put on our own oxygen mask first, and then also to be able to help our communities and be present to what's happening. I'm not talking about politicizing our Sunday services or spiritual communities and conversations. That's not necessary. Though I would say there's really no way to separate either. Jesus was very political. His ministry was politicized. And so, I'm not too worried about that, but I just want the presence that some people might have a shyness around that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and invite us into the ravery and really just openness to be with what is up in the world right now. Let's see if I can get my screen to share. There we go. All right, so you should see my slide there. Supporting marginalized communities. And, let's just go ahead and define the who and the what of it. Who are our marginalized communities, and what does that phrase even mean? So marginalized identities are more likely to have their voices demobilized, disrespected, and dismissed, and to experience discrimination and limited access to resources and opportunities. And that's really key, because that expands, beyond what we might normally think of. Typically, we might think of women, the LGBTQIA plus community, BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, the disabled communities, ethnic minorities, immigrants and refugees, religious minorities, and low income and unhoused. I think, we typically will think of those, but to really be clear, all of the different ways, I would add to that subsets of some of those groups, the elderly, those who have what might not be considered disability, but for example, we have a lot of fat phobia and discrimination about people and their body, and also there's a lot of body shaming for people who are too skinny. So when we really want to just be aware right now, because the scope of what the political climate is touching in people is so broad. And our opportunities in spiritual community to apply our spiritual tools and principles is also so broad. And so we can meet people where they are, and really that is our opportunity week in and week out, is to be in the practice of practical Christianity. How do we apply our tools and principles to whatever we face in life? So I want to talk a bit about being about allyship and advocacy, and without politicizing these terms. So to be an ally is a person who is not a member of a particular marginalized group, who seeks to help end the oppression of those in the group. So to be an ally, to educate yourself enough to know that you're not in the group, what is the group, and then to understand what are the issues, what is the oppression experience of this group, how are they not receiving access to resources, and how can you be an ally for that, so that you seek to end that oppression and that limited access to resources. And so there's that identity. And then there's the identity of advocacy, of being an advocate. And that's someone who supports a cause or individual or group of individuals and promotes their interests and centers marginalized voices. And so to understand that, what does it mean to center marginalized voices, is to not put yourself as an ally at the center and to be the voice on behalf. So you're not always speaking for or in place of, but you're creating space to center those voices. So where um, maybe there's a person of color, or there's a deaf person, or there's a member of the LGBTQ community who can come forward and speak, you're helping to create space for that. So you're centering that voice rather than it always being from the dominant culture perspective, if that's clear. And so that's part of advocacy work is, so we think of advocacy as like, what can I say or do and act? But part of that saying or doing is to be quiet and create space for someone else to come in and be centered and to have the spotlight, so to speak, in a conversation. And taking action to bring positive systemic change. So it's not about, oh, well, I have, Black friends, or I have, biracial couples in my family, or, my grandchild is transgender, awesome. That's great. And that gives opportunity, a close opportunity to move into allyship and advocacy that might even be personally motivated. But what action is being taken to bring about systemic change on behalf of these groups that are marginalized? So to be real clear about what it means, for allyship and advocacy, and this really sits in our fifth principle, right? About living the truth that we know. And it's not enough to know it. It's not enough to love people, but to really take it into action. Love is a verb. And what does it mean to create these safe spaces to effect change? We love to say, be the change that you wish to see in the world. And that requires more, always starting with prayer and meditation, but it requires more than that. It requires more than a loving relationship. It requires that we move into the world and into the systems that perpetuate this kind of oppression and discrimination. And so now is an opportunity to really become educated, more than you probably have been before. I know I'm taking opportunities, even though I feel well versed in these topics. There's always so much more to learn. There's always new places for me to push myself out of my comfort zone, and to find ways that I can really engage my own grit for this work. And I would offer that those with privileged identities have a responsibility to empower marginalized voices through allyship and advocacy. And so, we don't want to move into the white savior, like, look what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go, help all these people, and so they can be like me. But it's about helping to create space where these voices and people are feeling empowered, where they are getting access to resources, where they are, given space to speak and to be, and to bring diversity into spaces. And that is really the goal of allyship and advocacy. Allyship fosters safe and welcoming environments. It creates greater contentment in community and in communities and affects societal change. So this is the way, right, that we affect the bigger change, the bigger systemic change. This is the resistance, the rebellion, whatever kinds of words you want to use, subversion, to change these systems. And we do it in our interpersonal relationships. We do it in our own inner terrain. And as we make those practices and push them out more into action and into our broader communities, then this is how we affect that larger societal change. I want to share with you a TikTok video. It's so if you're not familiar with TikTok, there tend to be trends on TikTok, and so there will be a video trend and a conversation maybe that's had, and lots of people will do a similar video. And so for a while there was a trend called, would you choose the bear? And it will be described in this, and it was about would a Black person in the forest feel more comfortable being faced with a bear, or would a woman in a forest be more comfortable being faced with a bear or with a man? So if you're alone in a forest, which would feel safer? And women were choosing the bear. Then it shifted to would a Black woman feel more comfortable walking into like a boardroom, and was there a white woman or a bear? And so the conversation began to evolve and is really about, what feels safe. And of course, it's, the absurdity of choosing a bear as safer than a human. Really outlines the point, highlights the point of how people feel pushed out of spaces and not safe to be in their own skin. And so I'm going to play this because it's a really good question that is posed and there's a response. Okay.
Are you hearing her? I'm just supposed to read.
It's such a powerful answer, response to a really important question. And so I kind of messed up the analogy. It was a white woman and a white man versus the bear. So the conversation shifted away from the bear. But and what's really important in here is, the invitation to not be performative, to not just say the right things or want to look like, we are doing the work, but to really get underneath that. And I can give an example. The Sunday after the election, I asked people in the room, just from the pulpit, I asked how people were feeling, just to give an opportunity for all of the feelings to be presenced. And of course, majority white folks in the room. And, we heard love. I feel peace. I feel hope. All of these kinds of positive things. And I know people in general are going to want to, especially in a spiritual community, to appear spiritual and to engage in our positive spirituality. Um, and inside, I felt myself burning up because I'm like, I had already sort of set it up to create a safe space for all of the feelings. I had acknowledged the grief that many people are feeling, and nobody was naming it. And so I thought the more positive feelings that come out, the less likely those who are not feeling this are going to speak up. And so I gave space and I waited, and nobody said anything. So I said grief, anger, betrayal, fatigue. And then people started infilling some other less desirable feelings. Um, and we moved on, and I don't mean we moved away. I stood in an invitation to not engage spiritual bypass, right? To center ourselves in our teachings in such a way that allows us to use them authentically as we move through grief, as we move through a feeling of betrayal, as we move through hope and all of those positive things as well, but not to just lift up and to try to convince ourselves that we have hope because we're unity and we believe in divine order and and positive thinking. And after the service, a one of our Black congregants, who was a man, approached me and he thanked me for saying betrayal. He said, I didn't know that that's what I was feeling. I had not been able to articulate it. But when you said it, he said, I could just breathe because that's what I've been feeling. And so I say that to highlight the importance of giving space for all of the feelings, but for naming it. And that is the work of allyship and advocacy. I'm not Black, I'm queer. And so I have my betrayal. I have, as a woman, I have a sense of betrayal that, can we not elect a female president? Like, can we not do that in the year 2024? So I was working, authentically through my own stuff, but being able to name that in our spiritual communities and conversations can give permission for other people to do so. And if we can't name it, then it's really impossible to metabolize it and to move through, which is what we want to do, right? If we're on a roller coaster, you don't want to stop at any given point. You want to ride all the way through the ride, so that then we can come back to center. So I'm going to move into a little bit about what she mentioned, the performative allyship, which is relevant right now because post-election, because there is so much news frenzy, there's so much emotions that are high and in the air, and every day it seems like there's something new happening that is in provoking a decentering, right, of our communities. Then there are some people who want to move into supporting, marginalized communities. And so one movement that has come out is the blue bracelet. And so this is on social media. Everyone wear a blue bracelet, and then you can know when you're out and about at the grocery store in public, you can know who's safe, who's going to support you as a woman, as a Black woman, as a trans woman. And so there's a lot of dialogue about this. Some who are saying, no, that will make you a target. Other people are like, well, that's just performative. You're not actually doing the things that need to be done to support and create safe spaces for our marginalized communities. You just want to put a bracelet on and then feel better about yourself. So it's really good dialogue, and I invite you to dip into it if that's good for your mental health, but to at least be aware, because what's coming out of that conversation and that dialogue is the deeper invitation to put action behind it. And so there's like a trend that's like, okay, wear the blue bracelet, but buy it from a Black owned business. So there's a way to really be truly authentic and intentional in what we want to present out to the world. And I would expand that to t-shirts or hats. A lot of people are wearing hats like be kind, or, it's like humankind, be kind, I forget exactly the slogan right now, but there are a lot of ways that people are wanting to identify themselves as a safe and supportive space to people. And I think that's awesome. And I understand the resistance to that, because if that's all you're doing, then you really truly aren't a safe and supportive space. You're just a nice person. So I created this list, with all of that in mind. And so, there's this idea of, when we feel better when we're on social media and we sign a petition, which, what does that really do? Or we share a post. These things are important to do, because we put the messages into the algorithms that we want to see more of. So we feed, the conversation that we want to see more of. But what we want to sort of be aware of is that we aren't falling into slacktivism, right? That if that's all we're doing, then we aren't actually, let's get off social media and call our representative. Let's get off social media and have a conversation with someone who has a different religious tradition, or a different ethnic heritage, or, as an immigrant or a refugee. Let's get out of our bubbles and connect with people, so that we're not falling into the feel good of posting on social media or putting on a t-shirt or a bracelet, and then we can just pat ourselves on the back. But let's get out of that comfort zone. And when we wear the t-shirt, the bracelet, the button, the sticker, whatever it is, let's not, the performative piece of that is not doing the work of dismantling our own privilege or bias. So we want to maybe use that as a ritual to remind us, I'm going to wear this bracelet or this t-shirt to remind myself that today I'm going to take some action to support this community that, I'm affirming on this t-shirt or this bracelet. Um, and it may be, going into a space that you would not normally go into, a Black owned business. It might be, habituating your own language. So performative would be on the bullet point number 3 there, apologizing for using outdated language rather than habituating evolved language. So maybe today it's enough for you to practice using pronouns. Maybe you know someone who has changed their pronouns, and you keep stumbling over it. That's okay. Like change is tricky. We are creatures of habit. But if we continue habituating the stumbling over pronouns, then really being an ally and an advocate could be taking time to practice. So having, conversations in your head, or actually using your outside voice when you're alone, talking about someone with they them pronouns, and just getting used to that, getting that in your mind and in your body, and that muscle memory. Habituating using, if you've been uncomfortable using disabled communities or deaf person, or, any kind of descriptor, Black friend, you're not sure if you should say African American or Black, and it just doesn't feel comfortable. Maybe, someone who identifies as queer, but that's not comfortable for you because that was really a negative term for so long. Practice using the language. That is allyship and advocacy. Performative, on the final bullet point there, performative allyship would be showing off, I have, my best friend is Black, but what is that you've never had a conversation about their Blackness, or you just, don't see color, those kinds of things, but you want to sort of prove yourself by that friendship. That's performative. So move yourself out of that and into having real conversations. How many of you who have a community, a spiritual community, or just whatever your community is, since the election have checked in? Have you picked up the phone and called anyone who might be really suffering in the wake of this election or might be really scared? There are, I'm going to go to the next slide because I'm talking about, in the wake of this election, marginalized communities are feeling targeted by the rhetoric of the campaign and by the outcome of the election. So that's not debatable. That's just a fact. And here's some statistics for those who like that. The Trevor Project, which is an LGBTQ plus youth suicide prevention program, reported a 700% increase in their crisis outreach volume in the week following the election. So this is, essentially a suicide hotline for LGBTQ youth. So they had a 700% increase that week. This is not debatable. People are suffering. Families and individuals are scrambling to get married. The queer community is worried that same-sex marriage will be overturned, and they're trying to get married before January 20th. People are filing for passports or renewing DACA permits and visas because there is a lot of fear about what is going to be possible under the new presidency. So when we know this, it becomes there's an opportunity for us to engage in conversations that we might not normally engage in. There's opportunity for us to tap into resources, community resources. We might have your prayer chaplains might have a list of, where people can go to get support paying their bills or support getting food, access to food, maybe therapy. Can we look at our resources that we are connected to and expand them? So if someone needs an attorney to help them figure out one wife maybe gave birth to a child, does the other wife need to legally adopt that child to protect their rights as a parent? Do people need to get married? What about those who are coming close to their visa expiring? Should they stay in the country? Should they leave the country? There are lots and lots of questions up in the air right now. So are there attorneys that you can be connected to refer people to? Are there organizations who would be connected to those kinds of attorneys and experts that you can refer people to, and to be just willing to be in the conversation of being able to provide those resources. And again, picking up the phone and just saying, how are you? I imagine if I were in your shoes, I would be terrified right now, or I would be very stressed, or I would be angry. And I don't want to just make that up for you. How are you? And just be with them. So all of the pastoral care that we know how to do, that we're trained at doing, but to allow it to really be directed, like to be specific with people right now so that they can feel seen and supported at a time of such just upheaval. And it's not the only thing happening. People are still receiving diagnoses. People are still having, challenges in their relationships. They're still having financial struggles, all of these other typical things. And there are also joyful things happening. So, I want to be really happy for, this, that, or the other. And yet I am gripped by, anxiety right now. All of these kinds of things, to really be aware and just create space and to know that being available for that conversation is part of allyship and advocacy. So if those terms feel far away from you or unfamiliar to you, you may be, consider that you may be closer than you realize. So how can you be a support? Slow down, at conversations and teaching moments. And that's for you. Slow down enough to put on your own oxygen mask and check in with yourself. Do you need to reduce your social media or news consumption? Do you need to ramp it up a little bit so that you're aware of what's happening? What is it that you need to take care of yourself? How do you hold space for big energy? And are you maybe increase your water intake, you know, maybe be a little more mindful about your nutrition and nourishing your body. Maybe go to bed a little bit sooner or sleep in a little bit longer, to make sure that you are rested and that you're taking care of yourself. But slow down enough to be present to the conversations and opportunities. And I'll give an example that I shared on Sunday, um, because it just sort of came up as something that I realized I did, and I wanted to share it, and I'll share it again now because it helps me remember to take these opportunities. I was walking my dog at the park, and she's such a cute little Shih Tzu, and so the kids always want to pet her. And there were three little girls, little stair step siblings, like 3, 4, and 5, or 3, 5, and 6, and they were black, and they came to want to pet my dog. And so I was like, of course, her name is Bella. And I kind of, go through the routine. Well, the youngest one stayed away, kind of closer to their mom. And the other two were, petting her, and I kind of squatted down and was just, facilitating that encounter. And the other girl wouldn't come over, but she kind of was saying some things. And then she finally yelled, she said, "Can you pick up your dog?" And I looked at her and I realized she was not comfortable. And I said, "Are you scared?" And she said, "Yes." And so I said, I'll pick her up. And so I picked her up and I said, "She won't bite you. You can come over." And when she came over, I thanked her for telling me how she was feeling. And I thanked her for asking for what she needed. And, I typically don't talk to kids I don't know at the park like that, but I wanted, like, in this moment, because I was actually taking the walk because I was so overwhelmed by my own fear that day. I was in my own anxiety that day. And, for my trans kids and for my marriage. And so I took the walk to the park just to work out my own stuff. And so it was medicine for me to just realize, here she's scared, and how can I be present for her and affirm her this opportunity that you told me you were scared, and then you asked for what you needed and you got it. And I wanted her to see that 1, 2, 3. You said how you felt out loud, you asked for what you needed, and your need was met. I didn't want that to be missed on her, even at, probably the age of 3. And she just smiled, and she didn't really ever pet the dog, but she was there with us, and she was very close with us, and she was happy. So slowing down enough to be present, to have those conversations and teaching moments for yourself and for those around you are really important right now. And it helps everyone else to slow down too. It helps us to stay regulated, which means we can be co-regulated with each other in a calmer way, in a more centered and present way. Financial support, give to relevant organizations that are doing the work of supporting people right now. um, Education, your own and for others, and call on experts. You don't have to be the knower of all things. And there are people who are already knowing. So call on them, bring them into, even just give a 5 or 10 minute presentation on a Sunday for your service, or to come in to speak with your board or your prayer chaplains, your ministry leaders, whatever opportunity you can facilitate for that, to provide that education. Education is empowerment for people to understand how to be with each other right now, and how to advocate, how to be allies that is supporting marginalized voices. And to do it while you're, working through your own implicit biases, your own work that you have to do, education. Taking intentional action to wear a bracelet or shirt or not, that's for you to decide. But to be intentional with it. Are you wearing it intentionally, not just to send a quick message, but also to, can you justify wearing that message? Can you show that you are taking intentional action? Because that is what truly creates the safe space. It's not just the shirt or the bracelet. That can be an invitation, but when you back it up with action, it will be clear that that's what's happening. And then define your identity as an ally and or an advocate. And that really just came to me as I was, preparing for this session, as really like being clear with yourself. I think, when we have this sort of debate I guess, about what's political and what's not political, and what's, the role of spiritual people in the world. And, we kind of then can just sort of avoid the conversation and, and hide in allyship because we love all people and we affirm all people as divine. Um, but let's get clear about how we are being an ally. That's a great foundation for allyship, is to affirm the divinity in all people. That is chef's kiss, right? That is where we want to be. Yes. And that's just the foundation. So let's really define, take some time to define your personal identity as an ally and or advocate. What are your strengths that you can bring to conversations? What are your strengths that you can do? You have an opportunity to create space for marginalized voices to be centered. And then do that, but identify for yourself who you are as an ally or an advocate. Are there specific groups that you feel called to allyship with? And it not to feel overwhelmed like you have to be all things to all people. If you're an ally, that will naturally extend to all people. But where can you really focus your energy and your time and your resources? And it's okay to be clear about that. And so I wanted to give you some information about relevant organizations and resources that you can reach out to that you may or may not know of. And you may have plenty of your own, and I would invite you to share those here in a little bit. So remind people of their spiritual tools, like first and foremost, and that we are authentically using our tools and not going into spiritual bypass, not just hanging out in the rafters or in the clouds. Because we're so peaceful. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me, and then go around and snap at people because you have resentment in your body and you're not working with it, right? So we have spiritual tools for a reason, to help us work through, right? To go through whatever is happening in our very human bodies, minds, and hearts. And the more we can do that authentically, we can be in authentic space for others. And that's how we cultivate our own empathy as well, and empathy for others. So reminding ourselves of that, reminding others that we have tools to get through such a time as this. Folks with Faith is a great resource. It is a unity organization, folkswithfaith.org. It is an LGBTQ organization, support organization, and we have lots of blogs. We have courses on there that are supportive to allies that can help you. They're mini courses, so that it can just be a little like 8 hours or less for you to spend time doing this. Some of them are just 1 or 2 hours, and we'll give you some resources. The blogs are free and you can read them, and they're treasure trove of information to help you empower and educate your community, and also empower and educate yourself. And then there's also support for the queer community on there. So it's not just for the queer community, it's also for allies. And there's so much on there. So I invite you to take some time to visit that website. The Trevor Project, if you're looking for a group to support that, obviously you saw the 700% raise in calls to their suicide crisis hotline and outreach support. That's a great organization to support. Give to a local Black church, or organizations that support immigrants. Find maybe a new way. Maybe you've already been consistent in doing anti-racist work and have been supporting specific organizations. Obviously stick with those if that's yours to do, but also maybe expand and look for, is there a deaf community center? Is there an organization that supports immigrants or DACA students in your community? And look for those opportunities as well to support financially. And in partnership, maybe have them come in and use your space. Support Black-owned businesses. Audit your vendor list. When we earlier this year, we needed to hire a new accountant, and so we narrowed our list to Black-owned businesses or queer-owned businesses. And so if you need a referral, we have an awesome Black-owned accounting business that has clients all over the country. But look at how you can support that. It's Christmas time. If you're going to be doing shopping, look to where you can support Black-owned businesses, women women-owned businesses, queer-owned businesses, those kinds of things. And then also seek resources like the National Equity Project. There's a book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man by Emmanuel Acho, which also has corresponding videos on YouTube. That's a great resource for facilitating conversations between Black and white communities about racism. So there are lots of resources out there, of course, and I just wanted to give you a few that can be kind of low-hanging fruit as we move into and through the holiday season, in such a time of unrest and anxiety and grief, that there are ways that you can now take some action to support these marginalized voices, and to support the organizations that are also doing that work. So I'll close with this slide, concept shaped language and language shapes community. So how are we using our words? Are we thinking about it? We're talking about it and we demonstrate it. And this is also our movement into the fifth principle, which is to live the truth that we know in the world. We have some time to have a little bit of discussion, but before we do that, I just want to remind you that our fourth Thursday this month is Thanksgiving. That's next week. So we won't be meeting. But I do want to give you a homework assignment. Take action in your community to support people this week. What can you habituate? What action or language can you habituate? And what courageous conversation can you have? And that next line there in italics, define your identity as an ally and advocate. So those questions are kind of meant to help you do that. So have fun with that assignment.